Hi everyone, I am Yogesh and welcome to Data Engineer Labs. Before we move ahead in the course, I want to give a little intro about me. I have spent more than a decade building data engineering solutions using technologies like big data, SQL, Apache Spark, Python, AWS, Databricks, and ETL tools across enterprise projects. And I have created this channel because I wanted one place where anyone from a beginner to experienced engineer can learn data engineering through practical and real world examples. This course is not just another SQL course where we memorize syntax. Here we will build databases, we will write SQL queries, we will solve business problems using SQLs, we will learn best practices used in SQL, we will understand how SQL fits in modern data engineering, and I'm confident that by end of this journey you will be confident writing SQL for interviews and production environments. So let's begin with the course. So before we move ahead into the course, let's just understand why every data engineer needs SQL in 2026. Here in today's world, every second million of people order food online, transfer money, book flights, watch Netflix, shop online, search in Google and so on. And almost behind every one of these actions, there is one thing in common: data. And lots of data. But data sitting inside databases has no value by itself. The real value comes when businesses can answer questions like which product sold the most, which customer spends the highest amount, which transaction failed, which employee deserves a bonus, which shipment is delayed, and so on. And almost every one of those questions is answered using one language: SQL. If you want to become a data engineer, SQL isn't optional. It's your foundation to understand data engineering, build data pipelines, and manage data. Before we jump into the hands-on part, let me quickly walk you through what we will cover in today's session. First, we will understand why SQL is one of the most important skills for every data engineer, even in the era of AI and cloud computing. Then we will answer a very basic but important question: what exactly is SQL? We will understand what it is, what it does, and why almost every organization relies on it. After that, I will show you where SQL fits into the data engineering lifecycle and how it is used in the real world projects to ingest, transform, validate, and analyze data. Once we have that foundation, we will move into our practical part of today's lab. Together, we will download and install SQL Server, which is the database engine we will use throughout this course. Next, we will install SQL Server Management Studio or SSMS, the tool we will use to write and execute our SQL queries. Once everything is installed, we will create our very first database named Data Engineer Labs, which will serve as our playground for the entire series. Then comes the exciting part where we will execute our first SQL commands and verify our environment is set up correctly. Finally, I will give you a hands-on lab assignment so you can practice everything you have learned today on your own machine. So if you are ready, let's get started and build your very first SQL environment. So let's understand why you should learn SQL in 2026. The answer is simple: because SQL is everywhere. First, SQL is the foundation of analytics. Every business collects data, but that data becomes valuable only when we can analyze it, whether it's a sales report, customer insights, or a business dashboards. SQL is the language used to retrieve and analyze that information. Second, SQL is supported across almost every major cloud platform. Whether you are working with the AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Databricks, or Amazon Redshift, you will use SQL almost every day. Learning SQL isn't just learning one database, it's learning a skill that works across the modern data ecosystem. And finally, let's talk about AI. Today, tools like ChatGPT, Git Copilot can generate SQL queries in seconds. That's a huge productivity boost. But AI is only as good as the instruction you give it. If you understand SQL and the domain, you can validate, optimize, and confidently use AI to solve real business problems. So even in the age of AI, SQL remains one of the most valuable skills for every data engineer. Now that we know why SQL is important, let's understand what SQL actually is. Now that we understand why SQL is important, let's answer the next question. What exactly is SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It is the standard language used to communicate with relational databases. Think of a database as a digital filing cabinet that stores information in the form of tables. These tables can contain employee records, customer details, product information, orders, and much more. SQL allows us to interact with this data in a simple and structured way. The four most common operations you will perform using SQLs are known as CRUD, CRUD operations, where C stands for create, add new data to the database. R stands for read, retrieve or view an existing data. U stands for update, modify an existing records. And D stands for delete, remove the data that is no longer needed. Almost every SQL query you will write is built around one of these four operations. Throughout this course, we will learn each of these step by step with the real world example and hands-on practice. But before we start writing SQL queries, let's first understand where SQL fits into the modern data engineering. Now that we know what SQL is, let's see where it fits in a modern data engineering pipeline. Data doesn't magically appear in dashboards. It goes through several stages before it becomes useful for decision making. It all starts with the data sources. These could be applications, websites, mobile apps, APIs, IoT devices, or even CSV and Excel files. Next comes ETL, which stands for extract, transform, and load. This is where data engineers collect data from different sources, clean it, transform it, and prepare it for analysis. The processed data is then stored in a database or data warehouse, where it becomes organized, reliable, and ready for querying. Finally, business intelligence tools like Power BI or Tableau use this data to create dashboards and reports that help businesses make informed decisions. Throughout this entire journey, SQL plays a key role. It used to query data, transform it, validate it, and prepare it for reporting and analysis. As we progress through this course, you will learn how SQL fits into each of these stages with practical examples. So far, we have understood why SQL is important, what SQL is, and where it fits in the modern data engineering. Now it's time for the exciting part, setting up our development environment. Throughout this course, we will use Microsoft SQL Server as our relational database management system. It's one of the most widely used enterprise databases and excellent choice for learning SQL. To interact with the SQL Server, we will also install SQL Server Management Studio, commonly known as SSMS, in the next step. Don't worry if you have never installed a database before. I will guide you through every step, and by end of this session, you will have fully working SQL environment on your computer. So let's begin with downloading and installing Microsoft SQL Server. You can find the link in my description box. To download Microsoft SQL Server, we can search for the SQL Server download online, or you can find the link in my description box. So we have to look for the official Microsoft download link. So here the first link itself for me is the Microsoft official link. So I will click on that, and then we will choose SQL Server 2025 Express. Since it has a free edition, ideal for development and production for desktop and small servers. So this is very good for us. I will go ahead and download it. So now let's install it. We can choose our installation type here. In the basic, it will install the SQL Server database engine along with the default feature configurations. In the custom selection, we can select the what all features to be installed via the installation wizard, and we can install it. And in the download media, we can download the setup right now and we can install it later. So since for our training purpose, the basic features are good enough, we will go ahead and click on the basic. On the next page, it will show some license terms which you can read through and accept it. And then on the next page, it will show where the Microsoft SQL Server is getting installed, how much space does it need to be installed, and what is the total download size of the file. So make sure that you have all this requirement available and go ahead and install it. Now as you can see, my download was successful and SQL Server is getting installed. So it will install SQL Server with the basic features. I will skip the complete installation process. So I have forwarded my installation. It will take around 5 to 10 minutes to install the SQL Server Express Edition. Now my installation has completed successfully, and upon this completion we can see few of the informations displayed here. Let's go through all of these. So first thing is instance name. So in the basic installation, by default the instance name will be given as a SQL Express, and the next is administrator. As you can see, by default it has provided my Windows login as a administrator. And next is feature install, which is our SQL engine and the version of the same. Now on the right side we can see connection string. This connection string we can use to connect to the third-party services via API. The next is SQL Server install log folder. So this is inside our base location where our SQL Server is installed. So this holds all the log for it, and for our debug purpose or any of the future references, we can come back to this point and look for the logs. The next is installation media folder. So it has created a new folder named as SQL 2025, and then the media folder, and then we have installation resource folder. So what are the basic resources or default resources which are installed with the basic installation are kept into this resource folder. Now the next step is to install SSMS or SQL Server Management Studio. So we can click on this link given here on the display, install SSMS. It will take us to the official link to install the SQL Server Management Studio 22 installer, or we can search install SQL Server Management Studio and go to the official link, which will again take us to the same thing, or you can find the same in the description box. So now one thing, uh, the file which we will download here is not the SQL Server Management Studio installer directly. Rather, we have a third-party installer, VS SSMS exe. So it is a Visual Studio installer which will install our SSMS. So we can just click on this download, and once downloaded, let's go ahead and install it. So as you can see, the name itself suggests Visual Studio installer. You can continue. We'll wait for a few seconds. I think it should take probably less than a minute. Yeah, it's completed. So as you can see now here in this window, the install on the right pane, installation details. By default, we have our SSMS core component selected. And on the left pane, we have other components to be selected, which is not required for us right now. But if you want any of these packages to be installed, you can go ahead and install it. And you can also change your installation locations where an installation to be done. And here at the bottom, it also specifies how much of the space is required to complete this installation. Make sure that you have this much of space available in your system, and let's go ahead and install it. So it has totally many packages to be installed. Yeah, As you see here, it has total of 215 packages to be installed. So the installation will happen along with the download. So parallelly it will download and install it. Since my download has already completed, now it will install all of the packages one by one. Yeah, this was quick. My download and installation has completed within 2 minutes. So once the installation complete, we will see a launch option to launch the SSMS. My installation is completed. Now I can see options to modify, launch and more, where we can uninstall, import configuration, export configuration and update the settings. So let's go ahead and launch it, which will start our SQL Server Management Studio. And let's skip adding an account. You can go ahead and create an account and log in. So after launching it successfully, we can see it is asking us to connect. We can do it later also. So let's first walk through this. So on successful launch, you can see this page, what's new, where it shows what all the new features available in the current update. You can browse through each one of them if you're interested. But for now, let's go to view, open Object Explorer, and here we can see option to connect, where we can connect to a new database engine or a Azure storage. But for our training purpose, we will connect to our local database engine. So for connecting to the database engine, let's click on the connect. We can give the server name, which we saw in the previous screen here. Server equal to localhost SQL Express, or we can copy this string completely, and here in the connection string type, we can replace this with this connection string we got from the installation page and apply. So it will successfully apply, as you can see. Now if you go to connection properties, you will see that our server name and DB and all are updated. If we try to connect like this, it will throw an error because it is not trusting the certificate by default provided by the SQL Server. So we can just simply checkbox this trust server certificate option and click on connect, and it will connect. So now we have connected to our local server, and as we can see, there are few options available as databases, securities, server objects, applications and management. So we will be working mostly on database and maybe on securities to create new accounts. So in the database, we have two options again, system databases and databases snapshot. In the system databases, there are few databases by default created by the SQL Express on installation. As you can see, master, model, MSDB, TempDB and all. And these all are being used internally by the SQL Server. And in the database snapshot, we can go ahead and create a snapshot of a database and we can keep it here. So it will help in the future reference. Okay. Soon enough, we will create our own new database, Data Engineer Labs. So before that, let's walk through the options shown here. In the file option, we can connect Object Explorer, we can disconnect Object Explorer, and here we can open new project or repository or a file, and we can open a new query editor with the current connection or database engine query. And then in the open option, again we have projects and all, which we can directly import in local projects, or we can clone a bit repository if we have. And then in the view options, we have Object Explorer, which is already open for us, and along with that we have few Git options and Object Explorer details, which you can go through and let me know in case of any questions. Now we will go ahead and simply click on new query option here, which will open a new query editor for us. So this is a query editor where we will be writing all our SQL queries and executing them. So for example, we can do select @rate version, which will show the install version of the database, and we can execute it. So for executing, we can select this and we can just click on execute button, or we can press alt X as a shortcut. So if you see, when I execute this, now I have got a result pane. So this is the result pane where results of our executed query will be shown. So now, without wasting any time, let's go ahead and create one of our own database. So we'll write create database and the name of the database, which is data engineer labs. So if you are using more than one SQL query in the query editor, please provide semicolon at the end of the query to terminate the query, so that our editor knows the next line is going to be the new SQL query. So we can select this particular query and execute it, which will create a new database for us. So as you can see in the result pane, commands completed successfully. Completion time is this. So now we can go to our database and refresh this. So you can see one new database has came up, which is Data Engineer Labs. Now let's go ahead and use this database. So use is only session scoped. Whenever we type use, so this means that we are saying our SQL to or the session to use this particular database itself. So let's say we select use data engineer labs database, and execute this. So now any query, after executing this successfully, any query which we will execute within this window will be using only data engineer labs database. So for example, let's say select db underscore name. So if we do run this, select db name, and if I press F5, it will execute. So now it is showing me data engineer labs. So this database is selected for this session. So any query now which we execute in this session will be using data engineer labs database. That's all for today. Today we have written and executed our first SQL commands, and we have verified our SQL Server installation. We have created our first database. We have switched to that database, and we have confirmed that we are working under the correct environment. So in the next lesson, we will take the next step by creating our very first table and learning how to store data inside that table, retrieving that data, and applying some filter on top of that data. So today's assignment for all of you is install our SQL Server, install SQL Server Management Studio, create very first database named as Data Engineer Labs, and run queries like show versions, use that database, and show database. If you have any doubts or questions regarding today's session, please let me know in the comment section. I will try to answer it as soon as possible. Till then, keep building, keep experimenting, and thank you.